Make sure you watch this video as I'm going to tell you who you need in your team in FPL 25-26. Hi everyone, FPL 25-26 is now live, and I'm sure you've probably spent the last day going through it, poring over it and trying to find out where those bargains are, who's priced where, what positions everyone's in. You're looking at your fixture difficulty ratings as well. It's been a really exciting time. The community's on fire as always. I've had a look. Obviously, I'm going to share some hints and tips with you, what I've noticed so far. So let's dive straight in. Right, so let's dive in first with price. It's probably the first thing that people started to look at. So as we can see, the usual sort of suspects are the most expensive in there. Obviously, you've got your Haalands and Salahs of the world. And again, we fully expect those to be well utilised and probably have nearly 50%, if not more, of all managers selecting them. The things obviously to take in consideration is something we covered on the last video about bonus points especially, and how they'll be sort of handed out, especially when you're making your captaincy choice as well. So is Salah and Haaland both going to get those 3 points guaranteed most weeks like they did when they were getting goals? That's something obviously that we need to look at and study as the weeks go by. But I think you'd be a fool if you didn't have at least one of them in there, and I'm sure a lot of you will try and get both of them in, which is obviously going to be tough, but maybe that's going to come down to those, like I said, the bargain basements, those hidden gems that we're all sort of searching for and want to bring in each season. So the usual suspects are up there again. Obviously, I think we probably start in the midfield area. It's usually one that gets you the most points in the game. Again, whether that will change, who knows. So we'll probably see Salah there at £14.5 million, way above anybody else in regards to the value. But when obviously you look at the amount of points that he's going to get you, and also Liverpool's early season fixtures, which they've got probably one of the easiest starts of the season. Looking at the difficulty rating, you'd be a fool really not to sort of cash in on having Liverpool players in your squad. Obviously, another one in there is going to be Wirtz. I think he's underpriced at 8.5 million. I think he could prove to be a real sort of bargain, and he's definitely a player I would want to have in my squad. Sort of going forward, he's going to get you plenty of assists, plenty of goal contributions and stuff in there as well. And as I sort of say with Liverpool's early season fixtures, it's probably a case of maybe trying to get Wirtz and Salah into your teams as well. So definitely, I think he's slightly underpriced at 8.5 million. I think next up we've sort of got Cole Palmer and Saka. Always very sort of reliable in the fantasy world. Palmer probably had a difficult end to last season, without really many sort of goals and assists in the second half of the year. I can't see that continuing. Palmer's too good a player. He's a set-piece specialist as well. He takes the penalties, etc. I think Chelsea are going to be good this season, by the way. I think they're going to be right up there and challenging for the title. So I think Palmer's going to have a real good season. And also now having Pedro and Delap as well as Jackson and stuff, he's got some really good sort of strikers to try and sort of work with and play with. So yeah, I imagine he's going to get plenty of assists and goals again. So again, he's going to be one you probably want to try and sort of squeeze in there in the early weeks. Chelsea's got quite a decent opening run of fixtures as well. A couple of players who I think will prove very popular, and again he's gone up in price, is Mbeumo. Now he's obviously signed for Manchester United. I imagine him and Cunha will both be down as midfielders, but actually going to play very sort of attacking roles in that Ruben-Amorim 3-4-3 formation. So although they're down as midfielders, I'm expecting to play obviously a lot further forward than that, very much in that sort of Salah type role, where really you're playing in a front three, but you're down as a midfielder. So again, those two at I think they are both at £8 million, which again, not too bad. Are Manchester United going to do well this season? Who knows? Amorim's had a full pre-season with them now. Maybe they'll start to click. It's who's going to sort of play in the middle of those two. But yeah, again, maybe one of those two is a player you might want to sort of take a look at. I think Marmoush will be a popular choice, as we touched upon in the last video, that he's actually changed positions now from a striker to a midfielder. £8.5 million may not be too bad. I think with Kevin De Bruyne leaving, there's more opportunities for him to play with Haaland in the same team. So that's obviously one thing to sort of look at. And again, Man City have got a nice, decent opening sort of fixtures to look at. I think last season's bargains were Morgan Rogers. Obviously, he's now gone up to 7 million, which again, I don't think is too bad really. A leap. He's still one of the sort of cheaper attacking sort of midfielders. I think the other one that's going to catch a lot of eyes is Kudus as well at Spurs. He's 6.5 million. And again, Spurs have got a mixed sort of bag of opening fixtures. Some fairly easy games, but also they've got a tricky. I think it's week 2 and week 3. But outside of that, I think they're in probably for a good start to the season for fantasy league points. Looking at defenders, I think it's a must. You've got to have a Liverpool defender in there at this moment in time. Again, just with the opening day fixtures. I think the key here really is, though, in the fullback areas, there could be some rotation. You've got Robertson and Kirkes on the left. Obviously, you've got Bradley and Frimpong on the right. I think it's a bit too much of a risk early on to maybe go with those in your squad because we're not just quite sure who's going to be playing when. Are they going to play each week? Is there going to be a bit of rotation going on? Although I think, you're probably going to think Frimpong and Kirkes will be the starters. You can't really rule out Bradley, who's a quality player, and Robertson obviously has got all that experience, and maybe Slot goes with that experience early on and doesn't want to sort of put both of them. But I think longer term future, obviously, I think Frimpong and Kirkes will be the two fullbacks for Liverpool. Early on in the season, who knows? The other popular defenders, obviously the more expensive end at the 6 million mark, are going to probably be Cucurella at Chelsea again. Not a bad run of fixtures. Cucurella obviously offers a very good attacking threat. And as the changes have said, that obviously defenders will start to score more points with the new point scoring system. Again, it's something that you probably need to look carefully at, is actually, do you sort of sign 2 or 3, 6, 5.5, £6 million defenders, because they are going to get you good points. You're probably looking at people like Saliba, Tarkowski, Gabriel as well. As I say, Van Dijk for me, I think is the one who I will have in my squad for definite. I just think he offers opportunities for clean sheets, obviously. He does obviously contribute with goals from set pieces, but the fact of now you get more points for clearances, blocks, interceptions. I think he's a bit of a must-have really to have in your squad, especially early on in the season. So for me, I think Van Dijk is one that you would want in your team. I was trying to sort of build a good spine, so a good, obviously, defender, midfielder, striker, and goalkeeper in there as well. I think it's really sort of key to have it. Another interesting one is obviously Aït-Nouri. I really loved Aït-Nouri at Wolves, and I had him in my squad for most of last season. Obviously, he's gone up a little bit in value. He's 6 million now, but he's obviously at City. Yeah, I'm guessing he's going to get that nod at the left back place, and Guardiola will probably play more centre back. So yeah, it'd be interesting to sort of see how he does. What always worries me with Pep is obviously the rotation that he does. The only real players you can never sort of guarantee that, I think, are going to play Rodri and Haaland. And then everyone else around that generally will be in and out. So that is always a risk, obviously, with the Pep roulette, same as every season. But you can get on one at the right time. Again, Aït-Nouri, even at £6 million, he's going to be a goal threat as well. So, yeah, and plenty of assists, especially crossing that ball in from the left-hand side for Haaland. Probably going to get you plenty of points this year. The Forest lads are obviously players that, from a defensive point of view, are something else I think you really need to consider. I think with Forest losing their attacking threats, with Elanga going, obviously, and Gibbs White looking like he's going to be out the door as well at the time of writing, I think Nuno is probably a bit more a defensive-minded coach anyway. He's always sort of built his teams on a very firm foundation. It just makes me wonder whether he'll actually go back and be a bit more, even more defensive, in the sense of they don't want to concede many goals because they don't believe that they're going to create as many chances maybe. Yeah, I think obviously, your usual Milenkovic's and Morelos are going to be very good, obviously, players for you. They're obviously a little bit more expensive. You may look at Aina, maybe at £5 million, obviously, just a little bit cheaper than Morello and Milenkovic, but they'll get a lot of those new points that we talked about before, those two guys, and I expect Forest to get plenty of clean sheets again, especially early on in the season. So looking at goalkeepers, Jordan Pickford's one, obviously, we highlighted on the last video, saying that obviously we think he's going to be being the top point scoring goalkeeper, and that's reflected in being the most expensive, alongside David Raya at 5.5 million. Is it worth it? I think it could be. Although I do have my eyes on Kelleher. I think at 4.5 million at Brentford could be a good move, but we're not quite sure how Brentford are going to play this season. Now Thomas Frank's moved on. Obviously, they could be a different style of play. Maybe they're not going to be as solid at the back, but Kelleher is a quality keeper, and at £4.5 million, maybe if you're struggling to get a keeper at 5.5 because you spent your budget elsewhere, he might be sort of a good one to start at. Sells again at Forest is just a little bit cheaper at 5. So yeah, again, he's maybe someone that you want to potentially sort of look at as well to sort of bring in. But yeah, if you can obviously bring in your Pickfords and David Rayas, you're guaranteed lots of points, clean sheets. As we always say, especially with players like Tarkowski as well at defence with Everton, there are players that you need to look at. Maybe teams at the bottom who probably don't have as much possession, probably going to give possession away, going to bring a lot of pressure defensively. Will be a lot of clearances, headers, tackles, but ultimately are still very hard to sort of break down. They could obviously score you plenty of points. Finally, moving on to attackers. Now, obviously, Haaland's 14 million, so a little bit cheaper than sort of Salah by £500,000. But again, he's way above anybody else. I think Isak's second, I think, on 10.5 million. But yeah, a fully fit Haaland firing. He's guaranteed goals, isn't he? Let's be fair. Although City, I don't think are appearing as strong. They're still going to be up there. They're still going to be finishing the top 4 this season. Pep's going to get them firing. A lot is obviously on Haaland's shoulders. If I sort of had a choice early on in the season, I'd probably lean more towards Salah if I was going to have one or the other, just looking at the fixtures. And also Salah's ridiculous run of point scoring on opening days of the season. I think he's been double digit now for at least the last 2 or 3 seasons. So almost if you captain him, you're almost guaranteeing yourself maybe 20, 30 points there. So but if you can get Haaland in the team, obviously, it is a little bit of a no-brainer if you've got the money. But if I had the choice between the two, I'd probably edge more towards Salah at this moment in time. Other strikers that are going to prove popular, I think, are going to be João Pedro, even Liam Delap as well at Chelsea, with Nicholas Jackson being out suspended. Chelsea's got a decent run of fixtures. Expecting a lot of people will start lumping in on João Pedro and Delap, depending on who's going to sort of play. Maybe they'll both play as well with Palmer in the front 3. So again, that's something else to sort of consider early on the season. One player that we touched on in the last video was Jared Bowen, now a striker, but I still think at £8 million, I think he's a decent price, to be honest. He's guaranteed to play every game. He's captain. Obviously, he's on set pieces, penalties. I think West Ham under Potter as well will be a little bit more sort of open and expansive. And I imagine he will get his fair share of goals again. Again, he's someone obviously you would probably consider even at £8 million. Solanke as well, he's going to be another one who's probably going to be leading the line for Spurs, and with Spurs as sort of opening fixtures, I think he'll prove very popular. Isak, again, although Newcastle haven't got the easiest start to the season, it's probably somewhere in the middle. Isak, again, he's probably a guaranteed starter at Newcastle most weeks. And if he plays anything like he did last season, again, he's going to sort of guarantee goals. But yeah, 10.5 million. It's a lot of money, but yeah, he's probably going to be worth it. He's probably going to edge ahead of the usual suspects. So let's look at the hidden gems, bargain basements. Some of them not even hidden gems, some are very well-known players, but seem very well sort of priced. Looking at the keepers, obviously, generally I always try and get sort of a £4 million backup goalkeeper in. I think there's one standout backup goalkeeper at £4 million, and I think everyone has to have Dubravka. I think obviously with Nick Pope, I think he struggled through pre-season. Dubravka played a decent amount of games last year. I still think he's a good goalkeeper. I think Dubravka could be one that you probably want to have in your squad anyway at £4 million, starting or not. I think he's just a good backup to have as one of the cheap goalkeepers. Looking at the other sort of goalkeepers as well, Verbruggen's £4.5 million. I think Petrovic is a good goalkeeper at Bournemouth at £4.5 million. So again, he's another one that you might want to sort of look at and consider. But outside of that, really is, I think you're looking between Pickford, Raya, and Sells for your goalkeeper at this moment in time. A few probably maybe think Sanchez at £5 million is a little bit cheaper. I think Sanchez obviously had a difficult season, but as I say, I think Chelsea will have a better season. But Chelsea's got a lot of goalkeepers, haven't they? I think Sanchez obviously will get the nod to start the season, but I don't almost think he's sort of nailed that number 1 position. But again, I suppose that's what transfers are for. If he does fall out of favour, you can obviously take him out of the squad. Defenders wise, obviously last season's bargain basements have gone up in price. Your Munoz, your Lewis Skellies and stuff are obviously now I think £5.5 million. So a little bit sort of less appetising to sort of bring in. Although Munoz, will get you a lot of points going forward in that sort of Palace team, and if he can keep a decent amount of clean sheets. I think Mark Gay is 4.5 million as well, which I think is really, really cheap. Again, a guaranteed starter in that sort of team. He might be one that you sort of get in there early on. I think the other one as well is I think players like Wan-Bissaka and Konsa are going to prove popular. They're £4.5 million as well. So, yeah, I think that they're sort of the cheaper £4.5 million players that people are going to go on. I think Burnley defenders as well are going to be sort of quite sought after, just because of how well they kept clean sheets in the Championship last season. So again, if you're looking at a £4 million one, maybe Twanzebe is a good sort of choice in there for Burnley. £4 million again. I always like to have a £4 million keeper, £4 million defender on the bench, £4.5 million midfielder. Twanzebe could be one that I sort of bring in and stick on the bench. I know he's going to play. And occasionally he's going to get you a clean sheet if he does sort of come into your team. So again, he could be someone that you sort of look at going forward. There are some interesting ones really. I was very surprised by the prices for, and maybe this is based more on last season. O'Dogie and Van de Ven both had their injury problems last year, but also the fact of under Ange, they were very open, shall we say. There wasn't really much chance of getting clean sheets from them. Obviously now under Thomas Frank, that's probably going to change. I'm not saying Thomas Frank is a defensive coach, I don't think he is, but maybe he'll pay a little bit more attention to the defensive side of the game. And as I sort of say, with those early season fixtures Spurs have got, maybe Van de Ven and O'Dogie could be some players at £4.5 million who you might want to sort of bring in and sort of take a look at. Van de Ven in these days probably one of the best centre-backs in the league. So yeah, O'Dogie, probably in his first season was looking really, really good from an attacking point of view, and then obviously picked up his injuries last season. So yeah, maybe he's another one who sort of comes back into it. So looking at midfielders now, obviously we've talked about the obvious ones: your Cole Palmers, your Birch, your Salahs. Are going to be really sort of very popular, and so they should be. Sakas of this world. Used to be obviously Young's son, but maybe he's not quite the player he was. He's obviously still very expensive for a team. So personally, I don't think many people will be sort of picking him up early on, unless obviously he comes back on fire. I think some sort of players that sort of, when I looked at the prices, that sort of stood out to me. Again, looking at the new sort of point scoring system, I quite like Enzo Fernandez, to be honest, at Chelsea. I think at 6.5, I think he's a good pick. I think the back end of last season, especially the second half of the season, he played a lot more sort of an advanced role with sort of maybe Caicedo and Lavia behind him. He was a little bit more sort of getting involved in the attacking areas of the pitch, but he's also still very much a player who doesn't mind getting his foot stuck in and will win some good tackles. So again, with those new point scoring system, I think Fernandez potentially could be not a bad shout at 6.5 million. We've talked about Kudus already. I think Chekri as well at City, and Reinders as well. But the problem with those two is the Pep roulette, isn't it? So it's a bit dangerous sometimes to sort of new signings. Are they going to get the game time? Are they not? But again, the two players who I think are reasonably priced, and as the season goes on and you start to understand who's sort of playing again with those sort of prices, they could become very sort of valuable players to sort of bring in. Declan Rice, I imagine, will be very popular. He gets a lot of points obviously from his set piece deliveries. He's probably going to play a little bit more advanced again. So again, he'll be more of a goal threat. I think he's underrated in regards to that attacking side of his game. He's a very good passer of the ball, good at shooting, and again with regards to the extra points that he can now get, I think Declan Rice will prove very popular, and again at 6.5 million. Another interesting one, I've seen a position change for Njai, Everton, who's moved back from a striker to a midfielder, and at 6.5 million, again, he could be a bit of a bargain. He's probably guaranteed to play every game, and he's really everything good from an attacking perspective from Everton comes through him. Obviously, I think Beto sort of profited from that back end of last season as well. So again, maybe he's one to sort of have in and around your squad. Like Murphy at Newcastle, obviously he was an absolute steal last season. Really, his cost and his price, I think he's gone up to 6.5 million. Again, he could chip in with a good amount of goals. Is he guaranteed to play? Who knows? Tonali as well at Newcastle had a good end to the season. Was a real sort of goal scoring threat. I think he's around 5.5 million. So again, he's going to be someone who could prove a little bit popular. I think Lewis Miley is at 4.5 as well, but again, it's probably a bit of a risk. Is he going to sort of play each week? I think the only 4.5 sort of player is Ramsey at Burnley, who seems to be one who people will probably bring in as that sort of cheap midfielder. who's probably going to be playing most games. So as I sort of say, but looking at those promoted teams is real sort of key to sort of almost filling your squad up, trying to find those little bargains. Maybe if you follow the Championship a little bit closer and you understand those players, you can sort of see maybe who you think is going to sort of do well and come into the league. But unfortunately, I think the promoted teams have really struggled over the last few seasons in the Premier League, and it just seems to be getting harder and harder at the moment in time. So maybe they're becoming a little bit less appealing. But yeah, if you are looking for those cheap alternatives, then those are the teams that you need to target. One player from the sort of promoted teams who I like to look at is a Dringer at Sunderland, 5.5 million. Maybe £500,000, a little bit more expensive than I'd hoped. But yeah, it could be one that from the promoted teams that I think could potentially score the most points sort of going forward. But Eze now has jumped to 7.5, but again, that's not really sort of putting me off. He's just below that sort of level where you sort of get into those really expensive midfielders, but again, everything good from Crystal Palace, generally goes through him. Something to consider again with teams is the fact that they're going to be playing in Europe. Palace for the first time, whether that's Europa League or Conference League, I think that's still to be decided. But again, that's going to be a lot of games, and maybe there will be some rotation going on. But yeah, I think he's obviously one to keep an eye on. One lad who I really liked at the back end of last season in the league and looks very sort of neat and tidy and got a decent run out in certain games is Hodge at Wolves as well, 4.5 million. Again, he could be someone that potentially comes out of the woodwork and becomes quite a good bargain buy. So that's what we're all looking for, aren't we? I think the bargain buys are anywhere between 4.5 to sort of £6 million. So yeah, the other players from sort of promoted teams is probably Dan James at Leeds. We obviously know a little bit about him from his time with Leeds in the Premier League and Manchester United. So, but maybe at 5.5 is a little bit overpriced. So yeah, I think that's probably the midfield area covered. Striking wise, so we've already probably covered Erling Haaland. Generally, it's Haaland and when you're picking your strikers, if you're going to get him in your team. We've obviously covered people like João Pedro, Solanke as well. We're also probably going to be including in there, as I sort of said, Jarrod Bowen as well. He's going to be a decent shout. So we're looking sort of like the lower end of maybe players who are offering a little bit of value for money. He's probably players like, his Beto's obviously scored a lot of points last season towards the end of the year. He's only £5.5 million still. Whether he can repeat that form, I'm not so sure, because the Beto of previous seasons didn't look anything like the Beto that all of a sudden just leapt into life. But maybe he's found the right manager now in David Moyes and the right sort of setup and maybe his confidence level. So again, he could be someone who you look at and sort of say he's a decent shout at that sort of price. Looking round after that, really, it is sort of pretty slim pickings, to be honest, in the sort of the strikers without sort of going into the sort of £6.5 million range. Stan Larson's a good one at Wolves, £6.5 million. He's probably going to play games. I like the look of him. He always looks a goal threat. Losing Cunha, maybe, is that going to sort of hinder him a little bit in regards to that sort of supply line? But again, he's a good player. Evan Nielsen's gone up to 7 million now and I had him last season at Bournemouth in my team for a majority of the season, and he did fairly well for me. So he's gone up in price. Obviously now he's more around that 7 million, and then. But when you're looking at like Bowen just for £1 million more, it just feels a bit of a no-brainer to sort of go down that sort of route. There's just lots of players around that £6.5 million who I think are just a bit too much of a risk. No one's sort of jumping out at me to sort of say, that he could be the one who sort of comes out of the woodwork this season and grabs all the goals. So yeah, I think the striking department's a bit of a slim picking really in there until you sort of go up to like that £8 million level. Which is depending on how you've sort of done it. If you've sort of spent your money on bringing in a Haaland and a Salah and a Van Dijk and people like that in, then how much money are you going to sort of be left with? You probably try and get Cole Palmer in there and Florian Wirtz and people like that. So yeah, it's probably going to be very difficult. Like I said, João Pedro at 7.5, Solanke at 7.5. Even Wood, Visser, players like that who are going to sort of play week in, week out, those sort of prices are probably just worth that a little bit extra million and a half from there as well. So yeah, I think that's sort of where you are with the sort of the strikes. I think maybe potentially, rather than going down that Haaland route, I would probably spread it out a little bit more, maybe across a Solanke, a Pedro and a Bowen in my sort of three attackers and sort of rotate them around, and then maybe spend more of the money in the midfield areas around the Palmers, the Salahs, the Verts, Eze's, Cunha's, people like that, I think are going to be sort of really important. But I think now, the biggest takeaway is that people are probably going to spend more money on their defence than they've ever done before, or should do, probably with the changes that are going on. That does leave a little bit less money from maybe more of the attacking threats. And generally, strikers are probably some of the lowest scoring players in the game overall, apart from Haaland. So yeah, maybe don't spend too much time or too much money in that particular area, and maybe concentrate more in the midfield and defence. So that's a review, obviously, of the player prices and trying to sort of highlight who we think are the bargain buys and ones to look out for, and the surprising sort of price changes. Just quickly sort of covering the early season, which we will do in more sort of detail on another video around the sort of the fixtures. But I think the sort of the from the FDR, sort of the fixture difficulty rating, is stack up on Liverpool players early on. They've got the easiest run of fixtures. The first 3 and the first 4 are what you call green fixtures, obviously on the rating. Chelsea, I don't think I've got anyone above a 3 until game week 7. So again, you probably want to get those players into your teams, your Cucureas, your Palmers, your Pedros, Fernandez we've talked about as well there, Colwell, Sanchez. They're probably the ones that you sort of need to sort of be thinking about getting into your team somehow. And then City as well. The problem is with City, as I sort of covered before, I think your only guaranteed starters are Haaland and Rodri, and then probably looking at Guarahal, maybe even Ortega now. It looks like Edison could be leaving, so Ortega could end up being, City's new number 1. So again, maybe he's a player that you sort of look upon as well, sort of going forward. If you're looking for sort of like your mid sort of range teams, you want to sort of bring in players from to sort of like bulk out your team. And when I sort of say mid range, I just mean those ones that are probably not as expensive as before. So there you're probably going to be targeting your Crystal Palaces, your Tottenhams, your Bournemouths. So obviously they're sort of players we talked about there as Eze, Kudus, Munoz, Semenyo, Petrovic, obviously goalkeeper at Bournemouth as well. So there is an opportunity there to sort of, bring in a few players from those sort of teams and sort of try and sort of take advantage of their early season fixtures and get points from players who are probably a little bit less expensive than maybe your Arsenals at the start of the season, or Newcastles who've got a little bit more of a difficult sort of start to the season. But yeah, obviously that's something that you've got to sort of weigh up at the moment in time. But yeah, I think from an attacking point of view, lock in Liverpool, Chelsea and Man City players. I think from a defending and goalkeeping point of view is Liverpool and Forest and City as well if you can. They're probably the ones who are going to get the most sort of clean sheets. And then your mid-range sort of picks are going to be your Palaces, your Spurs players and your Bournemouths as well. So I think looking at that early season, I think that's where you need to be targeting. So yes, I've had a go at picking my first draft. I'm not happy with it, but I'm going to continue with that today. And I'll drop a video later on in the week and show you where I got to and what my sort of first team sort of looks like and maybe compare it to yours. So it'd be great to hear from you, obviously. Drop something in the comments. Just tell us about maybe who is a guaranteed for you in your squad, who you're going to build your team around, who do you think the bargain basements are. Maybe don't give too much away, but yeah, please tell the community. Yeah, smash a like, subscribe, hit the notifications. There's going to be obviously a lot more videos like this as well, sort of going forward. And as I say, the next one is going to probably be targeting around week 1. What's the draft look like? What's my initial team look like? And captaincy choices and things like that. So yeah, until the next one, take care. See you soon.